Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman live on your radio. Hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use starts now. This, my fellow Americans, is the broadcast for May 2nd. In the year of our Lord 2025, this is our one of two, and the goal always to protect life, liberty, and property, to promote God, family, and country, and to do so on your radio in the traditions of our founding fathers. Yes, indeed, we use the blueprint for liberty with all of its checks and balances, the supreme law of the land, the Constitution for the United States of America as our guide. As you know, we reject revolution. Unless it's a Jesus revolution, then we're in because we follow the Prince of Peace. Welcome to the broadcast that is a freedom-loving, fantastic, faith-filled. We're taking America back, one heart, one mind, one issue at a time, Friday. And that means the good doctor's in the house. Dr. Scott Bradley, freedomsrisingsun.com. When you want Q&As on the Constitution weekly, sign up and become a member. And every Thursday night, you can check out the Q&As on the Constitution, ask your questions, and be involved with the good doctor of the Constitution. Furthermore, you can also check out the Collegiate Series to Preserve the Nation. It's all available at freedomsrisingsun.com. Dr. Bradley, welcome, sir.
Well, good morning to you and good morning to all. It must be spring everywhere because it's spring where I am. Still in the 40s, I'm saying. I'll give you a weather report sometimes when we come on, but
that's all right.
Some of these people the ones in Florida, are going, it's in the 40s, it's the middle of winter, and I'm going, no, this is spring.
Hey, man, we're all excited. Take off the shirts, put on the shorts, and rock and roll in the mountains, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking sunburned city here.
It's because we're so close to the sun compared to everybody else up here in the mountains. And secondarily, when you get out there and start working or hiking or doing some things, man, it's like sweating time.
Yeah, it is. Unless there's a wind blowing. Sometimes, when it's in the 40s and 50s and you get a little breeze, you get that wind chill factor that, you feel like, oh, maybe I do need a windbreaker, But, if it's a calm day, it does get toasty pretty quickly.
Amen to that. Well, good things are happening all over the country. We'll get to your webinar next hour. Weekly Q&As on the Constitution and more at freedomsrisingsun.com. We'll talk about that second hour. But today, first hour, I want to talk about an interesting thing that happened. Widespread power outages in Spain, Portugal. They knock out subway networks, traffic lights, phone systems, stopping trains. I mean, it's just crazy. Millions of people across the, what do they call this thing? Iberian Peninsula, I guess they call that whole region or whatever. They had to start borrowing power or receiving power from other countries. They're thanking their governments. They dug out power returns to Spain and Portugal. The outages, though, they say the cause remains a mystery. And that's where I'm kind of saying somebody's lying. Tim Starks, our dear friend, constitutional friend of liberty. He's a threat assessment and risks analysis expert. He's a security consultant and more. Tim Starks, welcome back to Liberty Roundtable Live, sir.
Thank you, Sam. Welcome this morning to be with you and Dr. Bradley. I appreciate it.
And so let's just talk about this thing. When I saw this story unfold, I thought, oh, boy, massive power outage. But when they came back and said, we don't know what it is, then somebody else said it's some weird atmospheric something, it's a global warming thing, and then others are saying we don't have evidence of that, you kind of start to go, wait a minute, something's not adding up. We're getting fake news, sir. What do you say, Tim?
Yeah, without the risk of sounding dogmatic here and too impulsive to come to judgment, I'm going to just base my opinions on what we do know or what they have told us. And they're trying to say that there's been a atmospheric vibration of some sort that caused this outage. And my thing when I look at this, there's three other power generating sources and distribution sources that were in the same area that did not lose power. It was only the power loss with the one distribution and generating control company. So that tells me right there that if it was atmospheric or if it was some kind of natural disaster, it would have affected everything in the geographical area, and that wasn't the case. So
the
red
only
flags
way it
start
wouldn't
popping
that
up.
I can see would be if they are using different equipment or different infrastructure where one is affected or one is not. if I use concrete, for example, and you use asphalt, and then my concrete cracks and this and that because I didn't put joints in it or something, but your asphalt's fine, then, hey, so there's some things that could explain some of that, but on a broad scale, what you're saying has validity to at least start asking questions, right?
Absolutely. I mean, in America here, we have organizations that regulate that. We have FERC and NERC, and everybody kind of has to operate on the same standard here in the Midwest anyway. And if everybody kind of designs their system exactly the same way, they got to maintain a certain amount of rigidity and robustness to their system, and it's got to be hardened to a certain degree. So I would think, well, of course, I guess I'd get myself in trouble for thinking about something here that I'm not sure on a foreign country how they do things, but you would assume that they would have some kind of a system in place as well, like we do too.
You would think so. You would also think if there was an anomaly, even though it was weather related or some kind of atmospheric related, you would think they would explain the difference. Hey, this one went down because this is this, dependent on that, and these ones didn't because of this and that. The lack of further explanation is what makes us think somebody's lying somewhere too, because there's either you understand it, you can give a detailed explanation, or you don't. And half the community is saying they don't know what caused it. The other half is blaming it on this. And then when it's just tied to global warming, you're like, okay, anything that happens, they're going to say is a global warming scenario to further a different agenda. And that, Dr. Bradley, why don't you chime in here? That is what's making us go, more than anything else.
Well, you know, if they hold a press conference and their lips are moving, they're lying. So that, you know, that's just kind of the level of competence and confidence I have in these things. But I would ask Tim, and maybe Tim knows this and maybe it needs to be investigated further, but I kind of wonder if the components that failed, how similar they are to what we do here in the States. Now, this could be a kind of a probing action that's saying, well, let's just test this out here and see what happens when we have this type of infrastructure that's supported in this manner. How does it respond, and how can we, control it or take it down or whatever we need to? And if in fact there are multiplicity of different systems, and some of them went down and some of them didn't, I'd be interested in seeing the commonality between the ones that went down and maybe what we have here, and how they're different from those that didn't go down. Because, sometimes you say, it's unrelated. Well, if there's a lot of parallels and similarities and they start kind of matching up on the grid, you say, wait a minute, this looks more or less like us. I'll just use an example. I know some decades ago, and it's a long story, but we used to watch launches come out of the Ural Mountains in Russia, and they would come down in Siberia with multiplicity of, they'd have multiple, they weren't nuclear warheads, although they were ICBM type missiles, and the pattern that they came down in when they landed told us what they were practicing for some of our ICBM fields, if you will, because they can create a certain kind of force against our return in launch, a hurricane type force based upon the pattern they put them in. And we could do overlays and say, oh yeah, look, this is the field they're practicing against. And sometimes, it just helped us know how their targeting was going and everything else like that. So that could have an application in something as, diverse maybe as this idea of their power grid system. So I don't know, Tim, do we know anything about what systems went down and which ones didn't, and how similar are those to what we might have in the States here?
Yeah, Dr. Bradley, there's very much a lot of similarity between theirs and ours. They operate on different hertz than we operate on, so the frequency we operate on and theirs is just the cycles. Not a big deal. It's just that when they generate probably on a 50 hertz or 50, instead of 60. But the way the systems are controlled are pretty much the same.
So the computer systems are similar to what we would use. The computer systems are similar then to what we would use.
Yeah, like your SCADA systems and things like that. So it would definitely be feasible to think if, another bad actor wanted to test run on maybe a system that's more vulnerable or easy to access to see how they could affect that system as far as a hack. or as far as, vandalizing some kind of hardware, and see what it could do and how long it would last and how long it would take them to get it back up. It's very feasible to think that we could try a system here and then see what the effect is before we did it on a larger scale, because then they know how they can react to it and how quick they can bring it up. Because if someone wanted to cause real damage, there's a study that they did in the United States. This was probably 20 years ago, and they wanted to do a study, I think it's called the Aurora Project, on how long it would take for society to decay.
All right, hang tight. We'll talk about that more in seconds. Tim Starks, Dr. Bradley, and yours truly continue in seconds on your favorite hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use talk show.
Scott Bradley here. Most Americans are painfully aware that the nation is on the wrong track and in dire straits. Unfortunately, most political pundits only nibble around the edges when they claim to address the issues. Even worse, many of the so-called solutions are simply rewarmed servings of what got us into the mess we currently face. And the politicians think we're so gullible and naive that we'll buy their lies that they have reformed and now understand where they led us astray. Unfortunately, the truth of the matter is that they simply wish to continue to hold power. The solution to America's challenges is found in returning to the timeless principles found in the United States Constitution. My book and lecture series will reawaken in Americans an understanding and love of the principles which made this nation the freest, most prosperous, happiest, and most respected nation on earth. Visit topreservethenation.com and order my book and lectures to begin the restoration of this great nation.
Bypass the mainstream narrative with Liberty News Radio at libertynewsradio.com. Engage with charismatic hosts live or on demand. We cover the crucial news focused on God, family, and country. News that other networks simply refuse to use. Think of LNR's hard-hitting news and podcasts at your fingertips, anytime, anywhere. Join us at libertynewsradio.com. Empower your day with the truth, because the truth will set you free. libertynewsradio.com.
Introducing Managed IT Services from NPI. We offer top-notch data backup and recovery, email spam protection, and network security tailored to your needs and budget. With 20-plus years of experience in the medical field, our HIPAA-certified consultants know what it takes to protect sensitive information. Don't settle for less. Give us a call at 801-706-6980 and experience the difference with Managed IT Services. Remember, your IT support should be fast, efficient, and reliable.
With you live, ladies and gentlemen, Tim Starks, consultant extraordinaire, Dr. Scott Bradley, freedomsrisingsun.com, yours truly, discussing this massive power outage over in Europe and talking about then this study that was done, or this research that was done about, hey, how long does it take for a society to melt down without some of these fundamental backbone, some would call them utility services. That's where you were, Tim.
Yeah, and so in this study, they determined how many days it would take for total society breakdown and chaos. And then there's a certain point in this study, after so many days, that they call irreversible, that it breaks down and chaos ensues, and then it's irreversible to restore order in society. And I think any of these bad actors that would be trying to do that to the U.S. would be looking to try to hit that certain day amount. And I'm not going to disclose that day amount. But there's a time frame that I think they're trying to hit, and that is probably something that if someone was a bad actor, they would be looking for to see how long they could create this disruption. As we know, that one of the biggest ways to affect the infrastructure is our power, and when you affect the infrastructure of a company, or a country, it's the easiest way to cause chaos. And as far as what the reasoning is, publicly you hear, of course, you're going to hear countries push the agenda automatically. If their agenda is the green agenda, they're going to push out, oh, well, this is an atmospheric thing, and it's caused by not, complying with this new green agenda, which is they're too quick to run off with that. But actually, the green agenda may be causing the problem to be worse, because when we had the old LNG and the coal-fired power plants, you could regulate your power, ramp it up and down much quicker than you can with the new renewables. And I'm not against renewables. I just think that the renewables on a generation mass distribution are a lot more vulnerable than they are on an individual level.
Dr. Bradley?
Well, it seems to me like, almost every so-called quote-unquote advancement we make does make us more vulnerable. You talk about, physical switches you throw and ramp up the fire level on the steam to crank the turbines more, or maybe there's a liquid natural gas approach to things that are much more responsive. And then you say, oh, wait, we got to look out in the field and see if the sun's shining on our solar panels, or maybe, wow, where's the wind most heavy? We're going to crank this new wind field in a little bit more. I think everything that happens has made us more vulnerable, and honestly, this goes back to the idea of EMPs and everything else like that. The more we have technology involved, the higher the propensity to. It's kind of having a mass failure, and we do have a kind of single point of failure increased, I think, by the way we run almost everything we do, and the networks certainly have to be that way. So I would not be a bit surprised to see this as kind of a probing or a testing kind of thing, and saying, okay, now how long were these guys down, by the way, Tim? Do we have any stats on that, and how long it took them to restore and everything?
Well, according to the news, which I don't know how much of the news we can trust these days, but according to the news, they're 99% restored now. So it looks like they were down for 4 days. But that's
and you got to ask that question too, if it was intentional or if it was a failure or a breach of security of some kind. I'm glad we got up that quickly. But you know what? There are all kinds of scenarios. And going back to the study that you quoted, Tim, there's all kinds of scenarios that can cause severe, long outages. I mean, how many of these things are test runs? When you see the outage in Puerto Rico that seems to be happening, I don't know, yearly or every 6 months or something, you see that massive outage. You see I don't know if you know, but power returns to Spain and Portugal. But there's other countries that have been losing power, massive power outages too, right?
Oh, absolutely. As you're aware, Sam, I worked on one of the last and greatest the coal-fired clean energy power plants. It was the largest construction project in the U.S. at the time. And we had a discussion then as to the reliability of our future power in this country is going to decline the more renewables we bring into the picture, because our base load power was always...
The more renewables we bring into the picture and the more power-sucking things we add to the grid at the same time. So when you launch AI and EVs,
yep,
buddy, you've changed the game on both sides of that equation, right?
Well, you've changed your base load, and your base load demand is going to go increase significantly with these data centers. I mean, these data centers are popping up all over the place.
But if you increase the base load and then you go to not stable energy on the other side of the equation, you're going to have a disaster in the middle, right?
Absolutely. And we could see power outages in our country like we've never seen before. I mean, we're used to reliable, stable power here, but when you start depending on renewable energy for your base load power, it can cause significant risk to the
Now, the problem with this discussion is when we bring this up, I mean, basically, the reports and the studies show, hey, if you really lose power like this, you'll literally have, a couple of days of a little bit of panic, but it'll be fine. After that, and increasing as time goes on, I mean, it's dog eat dog, Tim.
So the key to the chaos thing in the study was, if you've got a power outage and it lasts for 4 or 5 days, but they have a time frame in mind of when they can restore it, the chaos isn't going to ensue. It's if there's an outage and there's no restorable timeline in sight. That's when we have to worry. So when the people controlling the power say we don't know what's wrong and we can't get it restored and we don't know when it's going to be, then you've got problems.
No hairdryer for you, Dr. Bradley. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I'm worried about my freezer. It's interesting. We have a lot of baseline information on this, I'm sure, for how we've tossed some of these nations in recent decades back into the Stone Ages. And by that, I mean, the first thing we do is we attack their infrastructure. Like if we're going to go into Iraq, Saddam Hussein's out there doing his thing, and we decide we're going to respond to him. The first thing we do is we attack their power structure. And there's a lot of things that are tied into that. I mean, it's not just being able to have my freezer work or my hairdryer, as you refer to. We do have some really critical things that happen. You can't move sewage around, for example. You can't run operating rooms in hospitals. You can't sanitize and keep pure water running. These kinds of things throw a real death spiral into things. It's like the most vulnerable of all society suddenly becomes critically, probably they're going to be the ones that die first. I mean, the very young, the very old, their immune systems are bad. You drink bad water, whatever. It happened in Gaza. It's underway right now, even as we speak. But if you take out an infrastructure, you are not just taking away my freezer that I'd sure hate to lose. I mean, this thing becomes a life and death, primary source for all that kind of stuff. So power and infrastructure. I mean, people say, I could do without my computer for a few days, or I guess I don't have to watch TV, or maybe we'll go to bed earlier when the sun goes down. These kinds of things have very wide, broad kind of impacts, and they really influence the number of deaths you have in a given scenario. And like I say, the very old, the very young, they're going to die. And so, yeah, this is a critical issue. Just to think, I'm without power for a little while. I guess I can, be okay with that. I'll light a candle. But all these other things are operated with computer systems and electrical power pumps and all these kind of things. And it's not a light matter. It just simply isn't.
Well, Dr. Bradley, you hit a very powerful point there. A lot of people don't realize that it isn't something as simple as just doing without electricity or doing without your phone for a few days. Our whole our whole supply chain depends on infrastructure. And a lot of cities are designed that their infrastructure has to be replenished daily. And if that daily replenishment of the infrastructure to the stores and water supply and your sewer systems is not maintained, the chaos that ensues from that is just crazy. I mean, we saw what happened in 4 days over in Spain. I mean, their shelves were empty and people were starting to really panic. Just a simple panic and what happens just from a storm, a tornado that wipes out an area and disrupts its infrastructure for, whatever time it does. And the looting that goes on just from that we see in the United States. I mean, can you imagine a 2-week outage, what it would do?
Well, you can't pump gas. You can't use your point-of-sale devices. Your ATM doesn't work. I mean, these are the most peripheral kind of things. I mean, when you come down to, hey, my little child is dying because they drank bad water. I mean, this gets, like I say,
it gets crazy in a hurry. Quickly. And it's important to understand that we need to prepare for this. I'll give you an example. We blame people for looting stores, and I agree. I mean, you shouldn't loot. At the same time, though, if I walk into the store and it's meltdown time because the power's out, and the clerk's sitting there, and I say, you know what, I'd like to buy myself some matches. I need to be able to keep us warm. I got to start a fire, and I need matches. That's a crazy example, but I'm just, or I need water. There can be an organized way for me to pay for that and to get out if we plan. But if we don't, the guy's going to say, I can't sell you any water. I know I got a bunch of cases of water over there. He's either going to be cool and say, just take one, or people are going to overrun his store and steal it from him, But when you can't conduct transactions, the more normal things are. If they come back and say, listen, I've whipped out my by-hand calculator. Here's how much it is for water. I know I can't take your credit card, but I can take your cash. If we all plan for things and put things in place, that's really one of the great keys. But I'm not convinced that we're being told the truth on this power outage at all. I don't know if it was a terrorist attack. I don't know if it was a trial run. I don't know what, but I know this idea that it's a mystery is absolutely 100% bogus. Tim Starks, Dr. Scott Bradley, and yours truly, continue in seconds. You're listening to the one and only Liberty Roundtable Live.
Pursuing liberty, using the Constitution as our guide. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
Breaking news this hour from townhall.com. I'm Rich Thomason. America's employers continued to grow their payrolls last month. The government reports they hired 177,000 people in April, a better showing than analysts had been expecting. Jobs added in the fields of healthcare, financial services, and transportation, among others. The unemployment rate unchanged, 4.2%. Wall Street futures moving even higher in light of the strong jobs report. Unless you want to donate, an executive order from President Trump means you'll no longer be funding public broadcasting.
The order instructs the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and other federal agencies to, quote, cease federal funding for NPR and PBS, close quote, and further requires that they work to root out indirect sources of public financing for the news organizations. The White House, in a social media post announcing the signing, said the outlets, quote, receive millions from taxpayers to spread radical, woke propaganda disguised as news. The broadcasters get roughly $500 million in public money through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and have been preparing for the possibility of stiff cuts since Trump's election, as Republicans have long complained about them. Bernie Bennett in Washington.
Israel uses its big stick in defense of a persecuted religious minority in Syria.
Israel's air force has struck near Syria's presidential palace in Damascus. The strike comes after they warned Syrian authorities not to march toward villages inhabited by members of a minority sect in southern Syria. The Israeli army has said that fighter jets struck adjacent to the area of the palace of President Ahmad al-Sharaa. Pro-government Syrian media outlets have said the strike hit close to the palace on a hill overlooking the city. The strike comes after days of clashes between pro-Syrian government gunmen and fighters who belong to the Druze minority sect near the capital. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz have said the strike was a message to Syrian leaders. I'm Lawrence Brooks.
Dow futures up 368 points. More on these stories at townhall.com.
You heard me talk about Relief Factor and how so many people enjoy a better, more pain-free life because of it. If you're dealing with everyday pain, it makes sense you'd want to try it first. Well, Relief Factor makes that pretty pain-free, too, with their 3-week Quick Start Kit for only $19.95, less than $1 a day. Relief Factor is a daily supplement that fights pain naturally. Relief Factor doesn't just mask pain temporarily, it helps reduce or eliminate pain. Visit ReliefFactor.com or call 1-800-4RELIEF, 800-4RELIEF for Relief Factor.
Progressive understands that bond between you and your boat, but imagine if something happened to it. Without the boat, you're just Tina with too much boat knowledge. Sure, it's helpful on the water, but with no boat, you're someone who talks way too much about knots, and no one cares what a jib is anyway. Boat Tina could get away with it because she has a boat. So make sure your boat is insured. Get Progressive, America's #1 boat insurer, and then go back to being you, Tina, who owns a boat. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, #1 rating based on boat market share data from ratefilings.com.
Introducing PrepStartsNow.com, your ultimate guide to readiness and peace of mind. We offer practical preparedness tools, training, and education to take your family's household readiness to the next level. Browse the prep shop for essential products, check out our planning guides, and stay informed with our prep blog. Visit PrepStartsNow.com and subscribe to our emails for exclusive offers, new products, and future events. Remember, preparedness begins with PrepStartsNow.com.
Former Sheriff Richard Mack recounts in his book The Proper Role of Law Enforcement, how he came to realize while working as a beat cop how wrong the all-too-common orientation of police officers is when they think of their job as being to write tickets and arrest people. Richard Mack tells of his personal transformation from by-the-number cop to Constitution-conscious defender of citizen safety and freedoms. Learn what it really means to serve and protect. Purchase your copy at CSPOA.org. That's CSPOA.org.
Why don't we say to the government writ large that they have to spend a little bit less? Anybody ever had less money this year than you had last? Anybody ever having a 1% pay cut? You deal with it. That's what government needs, a 1% pay cut. If you take a 1% pay cut across the board, you have more than enough money to actually pay for the disaster relief. But nobody's going to do that because they're fiscally irresponsible. Who are they? Republicans. Who are they? Democrats. Who are they? Virtually the whole body is careless and reckless with your money. So the money will not be offset by cuts anywhere. The money will be added to the debt, and there will be a day of reckoning. What's the day of reckoning? The day of reckoning may well be the collapse of the stock market. The day of reckoning may be the collapse of the dollar. When it comes, I can't tell you exactly, but I can tell you it has happened repeatedly in history when countries ruin their currency.
Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
Before the break, Sam cast his aspersions upon the lie, I'm pretty confident it's a lie, that they have no clue what the heck is happening. And you know what we've talked about if press conferences held and their lips are moving, they're lying. But you know, let's take three, should be readily apparent examples of the establishment lying through their teeth at us. Let's just take the Nord Stream sabotage that happened in September 2022. Huh? What? Well, how'd that happen? We don't know anything about that. Of course we know about it. We did it. I mean, Joe Biden and his crew were at the center of that. But they say, no, we have no idea. Oh, my goodness, it's a mystery. And then you look at the COVID con that happened, you know. Oh, man, we don't have any idea where this came. Hey, it was a gain of function thing. We started in the United States and North Carolina, moved to China, and then released it upon the world. But no, we don't know where this came from. I mean,
they want to call that a mystery, Doctor.
It is. And then you look at just at the end of Biden's administration, which such as it was, we didn't really have a president for 4 years. But at any rate, we got these drone things going on the East Coast, and oh my goodness, is it an extraterrestrial alien invasion, or is it a war thing that's going on with our enemies? Oh my goodness! And then, oh well, these were authorized to fly by the Federal Aviation Agency and not the enemy. I mean, that's the thing that we get time after time after time, and of course, there's long-term deceptions that we've had for so many decades, whether it's the the Warren Commission and the Kennedy things, the R.F. Kennedy assassination, the idea that just maybe Building 7 fell down in the world thing just because of a few office fires. I mean, these things are still unresolved.
That's a mystery.
They lie to us through their teeth. That's the bottom line, my man.
And that's why I call it a lie, even though I don't know for a fact it's a lie. But the problem is that they've created such a precedent, Tim, where you can't help but going there first. So in other words, instead of me saying, show me the evidence that it's a lie, I'm to the point where it's a lie unless we show evidence that it's not. And I know that's a sad position to be in, but it's kind of a reality check on these people. We've got to come at these things with a circumspect view and say, if you can explain it to my satisfaction, I might go along, right?
Sam, I've got an adage that I use, and I'm sorry to interrupt with Tim here, but I got to just jump in here. Anyway, Reagan used to say, trust but verify. My adage is, distrust until verified. And that's how I kind of operate my life, because we've been lied to so often. Maybe Tim can pick up on that.
Yeah, our buddy Pat Shannon wrote a book, Everything They Ever Told Me Was a Lie, to make your point. Tim?
I think you guys are on the right track. I believe we're lied to more than people realize. And I personally believe, as long as they have agendas to push, that we're never going to get the truth. We're always going to get the slant of the agenda to push the agenda. What's that old saying? Never let any disaster go unused or go to waste that governments and people with ulterior motives use. And this is another example of that. They're going to push an agenda with this, and you are not going to know the truth if it's going to fit their agenda. And I see this happen more and more and more these days. It used to be you could get news and you could get reports and it was the truth. But now the news is so pushed and controlled by whether it's the intelligence agencies or whether it's government or whether it's, some political party. They control the news so much that we don't get the right news today.
Now, Tim, I want to point this out, too. One of the things that I find interesting is if they come back too early with information.
No, absolutely.
And or if they come back with too vague of explanation, but yet they're insisting. So let me give you an example. Hey, we got power back on. It's an absolute mystery. We don't know what happened. How can you say that a couple of days after? You can't even have a research or an assessment done that fast, especially if you don't know what's wrong. You've got to dig a little bit more. Okay, I'm an IT, and I'm just telling you right now, you can't make those kind of statements because you don't know. And when they do, that's what tells me they're not being honest.
You always perform a root cause analysis on any kind of situation like this that happens, because you have to be able to provide a mitigation plan in the future so that this can't happen again. And I can tell you right now that when a root cause is performed, you don't come back with, we think, the problem. And there is no question. I've been involved in so many root cause analysis.
Hold on. If you don't know, you keep digging. You don't report. It's a mystery.
Absolutely.
What if I'm in your IT? What if I'm in your office as an IT and I come in and your whole network's down and you can't access anything? And I come in and I look around and I walk out and I go, mystery to me. People are going to go, what?
They'll be bringing another company in.
Of course they will. Rightly so, Tim.
Yes. And that's the thing. I don't think a lot of people understand the ability to do root cause and know the problems that happen. I've never been on a problem yet that you did not know what caused it. Never. You have the root cause and you know the exact cause of it. Now, I've never been in a situation where you can give that root cause and the problem analysis, within an hour either, like they have on this. Well, it happened from this. An hour later, you know what caused it? That's really strange. I mean, if it was evident and something blew up, you could say, well, there was an explosion that caused this, I guess. But when you're 3 days later still don't know what caused it, then how did you come out within an hour when it happened saying it was an atmospheric vibration?
And then now you're saying, because people are pushing back on that, experts in the field like Tim, and I may not be an expert in the power industry and know the nuances, but I am an IT guy, so I do understand how to divide tasks and conquer and troubleshoot from beginning to end and all this kind of stuff. And I'm telling you right now, you don't come out with a, golly, it's a mystery and say that to the world. You say,
No,
we're
you
still
don't.
working on this, and we think there might be an atmospheric component. Maybe we're doing some testing to see if we can't duplicate it, right? I mean, if you can't detect the problem or you can't duplicate the problem, you can't even really point to it, right? It's a mishap. So when they come out this definitive this quickly, hey, it's an atmospheric issue. Well, they're driving global change, global agenda, whatever, global climate change, whatever. If they come back and say it's a mystery, they just don't want to tell you what happened or what they know. I'm convinced, because you just don't come out that definitive that quick. You're talking about some of the world's premier power experts relating to multiple countries worldwide and saying it's a mystery. Well, then my question is this: what happens when the mystery happens worldwide and never lets up?
Well, and that statement alone would insinuate that we don't have qualified people over there able to fix the problem, and obviously the problem is fixed and resolved, so they have to know what really happened.
It just fixed
it can't
itself,
be a mystery.
Tim.
I'm sorry?
It just fixed itself. See, that's the other problem that I have with it. What does that mean? Have you ever seen technology just fix itself?
Usually that doesn't happen.
Well, if it fixes itself, what it means is usually the problem's intermittent. So it might have fixed itself, but it's not reliable, right?
Exactly. And the other thing is, if you've got something that's intermittent like that going on, that should really scare them a lot, is that their system is not hardened enough to be able to eliminate those kinds of situations, and that would concern me a lot as well. But I think you guys have really hit on this thing for all along. I just wonder if this is not someone testing the system, whether through a hack or through some kind of sabotage.
Either that or a test run by somebody, right?
Yeah. I think there could be some kind of a test run, just seeing how it's going to affect it, because like I said, our systems are not much different, and you could test run a more vulnerable system to see the effects before you put the time and energy into something that's more hardened.
Amen. I want to skip the next break coming up, because this is too good. Great commentary. The other thing I want to bring up is this. This is interesting. Back in the early days of power, and I know I'm kind of going backwards a little bit, but there's a reason for this. We had two choices, AC and DC power. One's great for longer distances. One's great for local power. What's interesting is the government backed the long distance one, because then they could control the grid. If we would have gone to DC power more, there'd be more local generation of power. There wouldn't be this big power grid. I think overall would be way better off, because most of the modern stuff we're doing now is DC power. Your laptops, your car stuff, all this. I think we went down the wrong road, but that ultimately what that meant is governments are in control of the grids worldwide. That's no accident either, Dr. Bradley. Why don't you start there and then pass it to Tim?
Well, yeah, we got the Tesla, Westinghouse kind of Edison kind of debates that went on more than a century ago. But it is interesting to me that you talk about governments being in control. Okay, fine. The government does intervene, and I don't know as the nefarious big bad government was always that big bad 100 plus years ago. Its big brother has become that in more recent years. But even kind of into that formula would be, with the AC network, it allowed companies to basically meter the service so they could charge for it. So it was a money-making proposition rather than a more locally done thing. So there has been big money involved in this, and I think to begin with, the big money was more important than the government having control, but it has developed into that absolutely, completely. And by the way, in Utah, where we are, we've got this big bad NSA group that's draining our power grid dry and taking our water and everything else like that to be able to watch every single text message or whatever that everybody sends out. And so government is intruding in so many different ways. Just for a second before Tim jumps in, I want to just point out, we're talking about this, it's a mystery, or we definitely know. Well, we get those spectrums. The truth is in the middle,
right?
Well, yeah, there usually is. That's where the truth is. But you look at what happened again, and I bring up the COVID con because I am so chapped about that still. Never again, people, can we let the establishment, the media people, drive the fear in this nation to the point that we actually commit suicide. I mean, that's basically where we were going. But this idea, safe and effective. Are you kidding? There was no evidence whatsoever. No science had been done. 6 foot, social distancing, masks. There was not a shred of science on everything. And yet buffoons such as Tony Fauci stood before the American people and said, I am the science, believe me. But there was nothing to justify, rationalize, or verify that these things were the approach. And yet they sold them as though they were the old gold standard. And that's kind of what we're getting from so many of these authority figures nowadays. And I guess that's why I'm a little distrust until verify kind of guy, because I have just seen them lie through their teeth to the point that they've lost all credibility. And
that's
where
I am too. And when they have motive and agenda and history, the mystery's got a history, right? Kind of a thing to where I'm convinced that what we need to do is expose their lies and say, what are the solutions? And I want to spend the rest of the time, we've only got about 13 minutes left or whatever, I want to spend the rest of the time on the solutions, Tim. Let's let you respond to Dr. Bradley, and then let's get to solutions.
Well, I think the greed bestows power, and the power that people have through control of people allows them to control things, and that gives them the money and the power. And until we get rid of that type of control in our environment, we're going to see these kinds of things. It's like we were talking about the central distribution of power through AC versus DC. Anytime you have a distribution center, all distribution depends on distribution. So if you're going to have food distribution or gas distribution, that all depends on a centrally distributed power system. So they all depend on each other. And of course, there's one major entity at the top of all this that controls everything. So, and when you control all that, you control the people. I mean, if you think about it, if you shut off the water to a city or the food to a city, you can demand those people do anything to have that back on, and you have control of them. And I'm not saying that we see that today. I'm just saying that if you have that situation, if that day ever came, you would have great control over a society of people.
To me, the solutions are generally twofold. The first solution says, what can we do to mitigate the problem when it happens? That's number one. In other words, hey, if the power goes out, people have generators. People in the South are a lot more prepared than people in other places because they get power outages all the time. A lot of people have generators, et cetera. But I think mitigating the problem, making sure that you have medications that you need, or making sure that you have food storage, or that you have water stored. And there's a lot of things that you can do to mitigate when it happens. But the other thing I think we really need to do to make this a long-term solution is decentralize. Okay? I believe that you can create small, tiny nuclear reactors right now that aren't even very dangerous. If they're dealt with right, modern standards, I think you could create a decentralized system very easily that isn't connected one to another. And you could say, well, Sam, that lacks the fluidity of power being transferred around, and that lacks the backup systems. Yes, but it also protects systems, right? And so I'm convinced that mitigation and decentralization are two of the keys to the puzzle. Tim, you first.
I agree. I think that if you look at some of these towns in Europe I've been to, that they raise their own food. Their food comes locally. They don't have to depend on food to be trucked in. They have their own wells. They develop everything they need locally to supply their town to be able to sustain it. And I think the more that we start to do that in our country, when you start to have more local supplies of your needs, you're less affected when these types of things happen. The cities, of course, are affected the most because they depend on everything to be trucked into the city: their fuel, their power, their water, their sewer, their food. And when that has a disruption in that infrastructure, they suffer severely and things go crazy. But people that live in the country that have their own gardens, have their own wells and stuff, we don't see that kind of disruption in our life because honestly, we can go without it because we can sustain ourselves. And we've really became a society that depends on this type of central control and distribution. So I don't know that you can mitigate some of these issues in some of those areas until they understand that they have to learn to bring that supply chain close to home.
Amen. But that's the decentralization I'm talking about. Dr. Bradley, what do you think? I'm thinking mitigation, decentralization, two of the great keys.
Well, unquestionably, those are key. And the Founding Fathers understood this very clearly. Hamilton, in a couple of his Federalist Papers, basically said a power over a man's subsistence is a power over the man. And that's basically, you're talking about this centralized control, whether it's socialism, that basically is the adjudicator of all existence, or you talk about a system that requires a central control of the power or anything like that in terms of electricity and so on. I think we do need to recognize that we need to stand independent of all creation beneath heaven. Literally, it's as far as we can. Okay, God is over all, and we're not going to be independent of him, no question about that. But the more we take on this attitude that we are masters of our own destiny, we have to be looking to the idea that we can't expect someone else to provide for us. And the problem is, well, it is not the problem, but one of the major problems is in society today, we're a mother may I society. We ask permission for everything. You go to the government on bended knee or fill out the right form or whatever, and suddenly you have a Pell Grant so you can go to college, or you have financing coming in for your school system, or you have a new water treatment plant that the government is providing. You know, what we're doing is we're moving away from this Master of Our Own Destiny program to a centralized, and you know how well that worked. That's a happily ever after story. When the Soviet Union had their 5-year plans and they planned everything centrally, starvation was rampant. But the problem is that we're moving to that in spite of what we should know. And the real answer is move it closer to home. In fact, into your home if you can. Do food production. Start growing your own garden. Have your little generator there if you need to, whatever it is. But the fact of the matter is we're just moving away from that. We let somebody make our decisions for our health. Get the jab. It's the best thing ever. Now we're having millions of deaths because of that. I mean, these kinds of things have not turned out right. And you can look at the Soviet 5-year plans and how disastrous they were, or some of our more recent decisions and how we're doing government-directed everything, and everybody's feeding at the trough. It's a disaster waiting to happen, and I just think that we need to have a wake-up call, and within our own lives, let's take care of those things that are within our own stewardship, and let's quit looking to the bigger and badder government to give us permission to live.
So my headline for this says 3 grand keys. Put your trust in God, mitigation, and decentralization. Tim, what do you say?
That sounds good, Sam. I think the more people realize that we have to be in control of our own destiny and supply stuff for ourselves and not depend on others or depend on a centrally controlled system, the better off we are. I mean, that's what caused the fall of Russia, was the chink in their armor with the decentralization, and they couldn't take care of themselves. So
one of the other things that I think is really important, and I don't know if it's the top 3 keys, but I think it's really important to understand. Right now, I can only get power from one source. I think competition is one of the great keys to this, too. In other words, who can bring me the best, most stable, reliable power, and who can prove to me they deserve my business and stuff like that. And I think we need more of that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, and it's hard to do that, though, with the way the system's set up. It really eliminates the competition.
And that's on
out
purpose, sad but true.
Yep. Yeah. And when I said the fall of Russia, I meant the Soviet Union back in the 90s.
Yeah, that's right. Good point.
Yeah.
All right, what do you think, Dr. Bradley? I think that competition needs to happen here, too. I'd love to be able to get power to 1 to 2 or 3 places. And the proof of the pudding is over there overseas. Tim brought out this point. Some of the ones didn't go down. Maybe I switch to them
they have
and I get power.
diversified.
Or maybe I'm on one of those systems and I've already got power and I didn't go down, right?
Diversified sources is always important. You have a backup, kind of a failover, fail-safe kind of thing. And this may sound like a really stupid example, and maybe I'm prone to do that kind of thing. But I think about, you think about your garbage pickup in your neighborhood. Now, when I was a kid, we didn't have garbage pickup, and we took care of business and we did what we needed to do, and that's maybe a story we could tell sometime. But when we kind of moved into this, centralized garbage pickup by the city or the county or whatever, we became dependent upon that. Well, when we lived in Colorado Springs, there was garbage pickup competition, and I'm here to tell you, I never had more enthusiastic garbage guys than those that were out there as entrepreneurs making money picking up my garbage.
Well, and this makes my point, right?
Absolutely. There's another option. So let's look to those if we can.
All right. What do you say, Tim? What have we left out that you think as a consultant really could help this conversation? I don't want to be just the complainer. I don't want to be the guy that says, oh, my gosh, there's a conspiracy meltdown and everybody's going to die and it's horrible. No. We can provide solutions and we can think through this and we can conquer this if we work together, right?
I think on a personal level and a family level, just assess the needs of your family and what they are, and make sure that those needs are able to be met without dependency of others. If you have a family, you have to be able to provide for them their food. You have to provide energy, a safe place. I mean, look at it and assess it and say, can I do this if this happens? If this happens, am I dependent on the power grid? Am I dependent on the food supply chain? And if you sit there and say yes, and then think that, oh, well, they'll take care of me, the government take care of me, just look at these situations where these things happen. I mean, look at what happened in North Carolina, just that disaster down there, the chaos that it caused. You realize that the government can't take care of you. They can't come in and take care of you, and there's so many aspects of this that should be eye-opening. Hey, we need to do something about this. Not the fact that, I believe that people should go to a homesteading lifestyle to where they can supply everything they need for themselves. But I know that's not possible for everybody that lives in the city. But I think
people can work on it, and people can create communities wherever they are. And, you can't do it all yourself. I can use Provident Living and do all that I can, but I can't do everything. But I can create a community of people. People who have different skills, and I can organize that community into people that agree to help one another and serve one another and work together and barter and trade. And I may be the expert in IT. Somebody else may be the expert in the power system. Somebody else may be great and say, listen, I've got beef. And what I mean is we need to realize, and I hate this phrase because it's a Hillary Clinton phrase, but to some degree, not by force and communism, but by free association, to some degree it does take a village. I know.
Yeah, I agree. And those used to exist.
Amen. Doctor, you got 20 seconds.
Okay. Make it a prayerful approach to how you and your family might better prepare for the challenges that assuredly will come in these end times. And it's not going to get better before it gets worse. I guarantee it.
Amen to that. Put your trust in Jesus Christ. Ladies and gentlemen, there are solutions. We, the people, are incredibly resilient. But I think proper planning and proper recommendations for solutions. Let this power outage across Europe be a shot across the bow warning. Not to be negative, but to say we better work on solutions and we can accomplish the task. Thank you, Tim Starks. Thank you, Dr. Scott Bradley. This is Liberty Roundtable Live. LibertyRoundtable.com, nationally syndicated by LovingLiberty.net. Spread the word, share the love, and God save our republic.